generation. You're trying to give the young people something that will help them, yet you don't know exactly what it ought to be.
Welcome to the TeachThought Podcast. Terry, introduce yourself.
My name is Terry Ike. I'm a former classroom teacher and now director at TeachThought, which means I do a lot of different things very badly.
And I'm Drew Perkins. I'm the Director of Professional Development here at TeachThought, and hopefully that means I do a lot of different things really well.
And together we're hosting a podcast, which hopefully makes TeachThought more accessible to you in more places, right, Drew?
Well, hopefully, yeah, but mostly it's just me hosting it because you just add episodes every so often, right?
Well, you know, I've got things to do. Remember, I'm director.
That's true.
Part 4, Attribute number 2. Digital learners prefer parallel processing and multitasking. This is part 4 of a 12-episode series showcasing the learning attributes of the digital generations. These learning tendencies are outlined in the award-winning book, Reinventing Learning for the Always-On Generation. Strategies and Apps That Work, written by Ian Jukes, Ryan Schaaf, and Nikki Mohan, and is available through Solution Tree Press. In Part 1, we summarized why today's kids are different than in the past. Due to chronic digital bombardment, the chronic exposure to high technology, such as smartphones, tablets, laptops, TVs, and video games, kids' brains today are completely different than our own. Digital bombardment is responsible for constantly wiring and rewiring their brains. And this sort of mental phenomenon has created a different kind of learner. In Part 2, we were introduced to the 9 core learning attributes of the digital generations with a short primer. In Part 3, we were introduced to the first learning attribute. Digital learners prefer receiving information quickly from multiple hyperlinked digital sources. We also shared learning strategies that aligned with this learning preference. Part 4, Attribute number 2. Digital learners prefer parallel processing and multitasking. Here's a quote by Gary Keller, entrepreneur and best-selling author. You can do 2 things at once, but you can't focus effectively on 2 things at once. There have been great concerns expressed about the inability of the digital generation to follow long and complex arguments. The rapid access, skim and leave reading behavior, fostered by surfing the internet, coupled with the multitasking mindset that is common in the digital world today. We believe it has made the digital generations less likely to work their way through documents that require a patient approach to follow longer, more challenging thoughts, opinions, and arguments. From the very earliest of times, people have always been able to multitask. Technically, it's called continuous partial attention, where we randomly switch between tasks, deciding which one to do next, and time slice our attention. We do it every day. We drive down the highway, we listen to the radio, think about what we will do during the day, carry on a conversation with the passenger. With the digital generations, this multitasking all happens much faster. There is so much going on. The digital generations are sending texts, watching internet videos, listening to downloaded playlists of music, talking on smartphones, looking at brightly colored flashing websites, sending instant messages, and generally counting on the internet as their external brain. As a result, their minds must continuously skim and skip between tasks to keep up. This butterfly brain effect can be a real challenge when educators are trying to get students to focus on important tasks or employers are trying to get workers to focus on their jobs. What the research says is that effective multitasking is really about having a good memory, capable of being able to pay attention to several familiar tasks at one time, while also being highly adept at task switching. This isn't the way the older generations grew up. This is not what most of us experienced as children. Do you remember when your parents might have said, "Stop listening to that music or watching the TV while you study"? They said the best way to study was to isolate yourself from the TV, the radio or CD player. And the busy sidewalk outside your bedroom window, ignore it. They also insisted to study effectively you needed to clear a nice, uncluttered study space with a comfy chair, good lighting, and ample working area. Compare that approach and traditional mindset to the way that the digital generations function today. How many of you have walked into a kid's bedroom recently? They are working on a tablet, earbuds dangling around their neck, cranking out the music of some band you've never heard of before called Brain Enema or Baby Metal. Their hand reflexively tapping to the backbeat of the song. Meanwhile, they're also doing their homework, watching a YouTube video, tweeting a friend, downloading some music and an image from Google, and cyber shopping, while they're simultaneously carrying on 2 conversations on Instagram about last night's episode of The Walking Dead. And if you ask them, they'll tell you they're still bored. They'll also tell you that they have to play their music loud because it helps them concentrate. Something that many of the older generations simply can't fathom. In his book Brain Rules, John Medina tells us that research on multitasking indicates that contrary to what the digital generations might believe, multitasking modern students are not nearly as effective at concentrating on a particular task as those who single task. In fact, humans are biologically incapable of processing multiple information-rich inputs simultaneously. Medina says that the effect of multitasking on productivity is like trying to get something done after you've had several stiff drinks. We might think we are doing very well, but in reality we're slower and sloppier, and we make many more mistakes. His studies show that clearly that someone who is regularly interrupted takes 50% longer to complete a task and makes up to 50% more errors. In iBrain, Gary Small and Gigi Vorgon point out that while multitasking is an essential skill in the digital world, to minimize the negative aspects of doing multiple tasks simultaneously, we must balance multitasking with strategies for developing single-tasking skills. Multitasking has become a necessary skill of modern life, but we need to acknowledge the challenges and adapt accordingly. Several strategies can help, such as striving to stay on one task longer and avoiding task switching whenever possible. In Brain Rules, Medina also states that educators need to acknowledge that multimedia multitasking is an everyday reality of life, that students do not suffer notable cognitive shortcomings as they multitask. Rather, they are learning more, and they are more adept at finding answers to deep questions, in part because they can search effectively and they can access collective intelligence. And Medina cautions that the solution to the challenges of multitasking is not just to remove technology and other distractions, because they are too intricately woven into the digital generation's lives. The bottom line is that whether we like it or not, and whether we think it was better back then or not, we're never going back to 1985 or even 2005. The problem is that there are parents, politicians, lawmakers, and even some educators who continue to promote an educational model and prepare students for a world that no longer exists. What follows next are some strategies, apps, and resources for educators to consider using with learners to access their preference for multitasking and parallel processing. First, tech breaks start with the teacher giving the students 1 minute to use their personal devices, to surf the web or check for tweets, texts, or Snapchat messages. After a minute, the students are expected to turn their device to silent and place them upside down on the corner of their desk and focus on classwork for 15 minutes. Having their devices upside down prevents external distractions such as vibrations or flashing alerts and provides a signal to the brain that there is no need to be internally distracted because an opportunity to check again will be coming soon. At the end of the 15-minute focus time, the teacher declares another tech break, and the students take another minute to check in with their virtual worlds, followed by more on-task time and another tech break. The trick is to gradually lengthen the time between tech breaks to teach students how to focus for longer periods of time without being distracted. Evernote is a powerfully versatile app with tremendous potential for personal productivity, research, and collaboration. Users create notes similar to a word processing document and store them online. An Evernote user also has the ability to record audio and video notes, import documents, or enter present mode to create a presentation for viewers. Users can visit their Evernote account online, download software for a Mac or PC, or install apps on mobile devices. Evernote synchronizes the notes to web storage, making notes available across all devices. Socrative is a smart student response system that empowers teachers to engage their students through a series of educational exercises and games utilizing smartphones, laptops, and tablets. In a matter of minutes, teachers can set up an interactive activity and capture authentic attitudinal or performance data from their students. Since Socrative is free and available on all digital platforms, students are able to select the device they wish to use during learning activities. Socrative is a versatile assessment tool that can be utilized in all content areas. Teachers can use it to create a warm-up activity to gauge prior experiences, develop a gaming experience, using one of several activity choices offered when building an activity, or create an exit ticket with the ability to view real-time data to determine future instruction for students. For additional strategies, please consider purchasing the award-winning book, Reinventing Learning for the Always-On Generation, Strategies and Apps That Work, available through Solution Tree Press. In our next installment of the series, we will explore the digital generation's preference for processing pictures, sounds, color, and video before they process text.
New trends in teaching to increase student achievement is ever-changing. The Curriculum and Instruction Master's Program offered at George Washington University, located in Washington, D.C., gives you the unique opportunity to study current standards impacting the future of education. The program further prepares teachers as education leaders by offering specialty concentrations in reading and literacy, elementary education, or secondary education. Optional internships give students a first-hand experience in local schools and educational organizations in the heart of the nation's capital. Learn more by visiting the Graduate School of Education website at gsehd.gwu.edu.
That'll do it for today's podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and if you didn't hate it, please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening, and share it on social media wherever you feel comfortable. Speaking of social media, you can find us in all the normal places like Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and please share us on those places as well. And don't forget about TeachThought Professional Development. You can find us there at teachthought.com/PD.